Hello everybody, welcome to HCT RAH, Real Access Hale. I'm Michael Fox and I'm here with Brad Schroeder, Mr. Brad Schroeder, our longtime fight choreographer. How did you get into choreographing fighting?
I wanted to be a stuntman when I was a kid.
Ah, excellent.
So I was always jumping off of decks and running around and fighting just imaginary people. And then I got into college, took a class, and from that point on, it's just been up and up and up.
Something you've done.
Yeah.
And you freelance this, and you work
Yes.
for quite a few companies teaching fight choreography.
Correct. I've done Utah Opera. I've done other theaters throughout the region. I've done a lot at Hale, and I love working here because it's so supportive. It's a great place to do it. People are usually itching to do this kind of stuff because it's never taught anywhere. So
now that's one of the keys to all of this. People don't understand all the time. I don't think that fight choreography is as precise as footstep.
I say it's a dance. It's balletic, it's athletic. You've got to have a good sense of your body, how to use your body, and you've got to have a good sense of what you can do and what you shouldn't do.
Right.
And it's choreographed to every single move that you see on stage. I choreograph that specifically. Nothing's left up to chance or improvisation because it has to be that way for the safety.
Right.
The safety is paramount when you're doing fight choreography. You know, the realism, the story we're telling, all that is great, but safety is the most important thing so we're not hurting the patrons or ourselves.
Right. So in fact, you start a show with a fair amount of fighting. You start with a boot camp. Mm-hmm. And what do you do at a boot camp?
So in that boot camp, you have to realize probably 80% of the people have never picked up a sword before.
Right.
when they're doing this stuff. So we go through all the basics. I teach them all the sword moves. I teach them how to throw a punch, how to fall, slaps, kicks, and then we go on to sword play where I teach them the moves of the sword, how to throw a sword, how to receive, how to parry, all of that stuff in as much time as we can get. We cram all that in so that when we start rehearsals, we have a really good basic knowledge of how to throw the sword and how to throw a punch so that we can use rehearsal time for choreography.
Right. So you really give a vocabulary, just like ballet.
Absolutely.
You teach what it means to plie and to, but you use words like
Right,
from
we
fencing.
thrusts and chops and parries and
Right.
yeah.
Okay, great. Well, the disclaimer here is that we're going to do this in 2 minutes, but he spends weeks with people on this. But tell me 2 or 3 things about a sword.
Okay. Thank you. This is a rapier sword. It's got a really nice balance to it. You'll have broadswords, you'll have single-handed swords, but a rapier sword has a lot of finesse to it. It's a really, like I say, a balletic kind of movement. You can really allow your body to get into it, full extension, this kind of stuff, and it's a really pretty kind of sword to have on stage. It's so precise.
And it's quite sweeping.
Right, right.
big.
You can do a lot of this stuff here. Yeah.
So what's one thing you would teach me to do with the sword?
I'll teach you a thrust. Okay. So a thrust is basically coming to this side. I'll do it to you first, so stand still. A thrust would be here or here. Notice every time I'm bringing it around, I drop my sword. There again, the safety factor. If I bring it across this way, I'm putting you in danger. So I always like to make sure that if you're bringing it across the body, you're dropping it this way or you're bringing it up this way. The goal is to never cross the plane of your body. So a thrust here and a thrust here. You would do a parry, or I would do a parry if you're going to do a thrust. So if you just want to thrust it this way here, just nice and slow, just extend it out like this, bend on your knee, I would parry like this. Okay, drop it and bring it over here. I'm going to parry this way. Okay, so that's a thrust and a parry. Then we have chops, and we have sweeps, and we have plie, we have glissades, all sorts of things that we can do.
And you teach them not with the sword usually. What do you start with?
We start with dowels. So we have a nice thick wooden dowel that feels a bit clunky, but it keeps us safe.
So how do we stay safe when you've got 2 people in the same role and they switch each other, multiple casts, and where sometimes someone goes on vacation and they're gone for 5 or 6 days before they come back? How do we make sure that we're safe?
Every single person has to do it every single time the exact same way. If you have 2 leads, and as you say, one lead goes off and another lead comes in, that lead who's substituting for that lead has to know that fight cold just the way that person did. And they have to do it the same way. There's no improvisation or interpretation in fight choreography. You're doing it the same way. So if I'm doing a chop here, the other person has to do that chop here as well. They can't bring it down here, they can't bring it up here, because then you as the opponent, you're not sure where that's coming from. It's all about choreography and making sure that you're hitting every single point the way it's been rehearsed.
Well, I've loved watching it over the years, and I find it so fascinating in the round because, of course, with the proscenium stage, fight choreography to a degree is easier, right?
I've had to come up with many interesting kills. When you have a kill on stage or a stabbing on stage or somebody getting hurt on stage, choreographed getting hurt on stage, it's so much different in the round because every single person can see. So you want to make sure that you're coming up with creative ways that sells the realism, keeps the actor safe, but will be believable to the audience. And we've been successful. It's been, but you know, in a proscenium, you can stab over this way, the audience is there. Here, they're going to see it, so we just have to come up with different ways to do that.
So the fact that you're not really hitting someone, some audience is always going to see that hole between a fist and a face.
Right.
But the thing I always point out is, but 3/4 of the audience, it can look very real if it's done correctly.
And if you have the proper pacing and you have the proper speed and you have the proper position of the person, even that person right there is most likely not going to see the distance that we have with the punch.
Right.
It's all in the way that you present it, all in the way that you rehearse it. And that's why we do a fight call as well, to make sure that every single show we have, if we have sword play, every single night, every single performance, we have a fight call, which basically means we're putting the actors through the fight that they're going to be doing on stage in the next 45 minutes. The reason for that is to get it fresh in your mind every single time. You always want to go through it first. It's just like a vocal warm-up or going through your lines. I don't know any actor who's not going through his lines during the run of the show.
Or during the major lifts in a dance.
Exactly.
The things that have danger to them, you're going to rehearse before the show. And the other thing I love about the round versus proscenium is proscenium, of course, you almost do everything with that upstage hand. And so I do something up here to hit you, if you will. Whereas in the round, we can take the angle with the camera. This is the way you do it in film.
Right.
And then it looks so much more real, even though I can miss you.
Exactly.
So teach me a little bit how we do that.
If there are cameras right here, what I'm going to do is, when I'm throwing a punch to you, is I'm going to bring it across this way. I'm going to bring it right across your shoulder here. So rather than coming here and then taking a left turn and doing that, I'm going to make sure I'm perfectly safe. So I would put my hand on your shoulder for safety distance. We're always looking at each other for a good eye contact to make sure that we know what's coming and that you know, everyone's ready. I'm going to cock my hand up here and then I'm going to bring it across like that. So when your reaction matches my action, that's what sells the move. It's interesting you bring up film because so many people think that you know, a 1-minute fight, it's no big deal. That's because in film, you have cuts all over the place. You can cut from this move to this move to this move. Trying to do, in Three Musketeers we did some fights that were 2.5, 3 minutes long. That's a long fight, a lot of moves in that fight. And you have to have every single move down pat. So when we're doing something as simple as throwing a punch, we've got to have the energy and the body style to do that, and that translates to 50, 60, 70 moves in a given fight. So it's exhausting, but it's fun, but it's a completely different discipline than film. Wow. You've got to be on your game.
Yeah, absolutely. For the danger factor, as well as for the reality factor. Because in the end, you know, safety first, but behind that, what you're trying to do is tell a good story.
Exactly.
And you don't tell a good story if everyone goes, oh, that fight's just totally fake.
Right. And I always equate a fight with a line of dialogue. If you have 3 or 4 moves in a fight, you're telling a story with those 3 or 4 moves. Otherwise, there's no reason to have the moves there. If they're just superfluous, there's no reason to have them there. So every single move is a line of dialogue. So that dialogue needs to be clear to the audience. The audience needs to know what's happening, just like they need to hear a line of dialogue. They need to see each and every move. So I really stress getting the whole body into it. You know, none of this lazy stuff. You're fighting for your life, or you're fighting for your love, or you're fighting for your passion, whatever it is. You've got to translate that on stage and show the audience exactly what your intent is, just like with music, just like with dialogue, just like with dance.
I think it can be said any better than that. Brad Schroeder, we love your work.
Oh, thank you, Michael.
Thank you for showing us.
Well, thank you so much.